When we lead with love, we carry it 24/7. And when we teach with love, we make sure our students don't forget it. To be black and to educate is to be superhero without the applause. It's to show up and show out no matter the cause. It's to play for the students no matter the winner. Because when we work arm in arm, the impact is bigger. Welcome to Untenured Podcast, where educators have a space to speak their truth. So tap in and listen to the very voices that mold our youth.
So welcome YouTube community and beyond to episode 4 of our Untenured podcast. We are so excited to go all the way to Kentucky, just like we said, to bring this dope educator soul in a cozy conversation here in Sadie's. And here at Sadie's house, you know, speaking your truth can never go left because it's your right. And so we are so hyped to have Jazz here with us. And I actually want to kick off by sharing a quote from one of your resources that you have in your bundles. It's actually a quote by Kendrick Lamar. And it says, if I'm going to tell a real story, I'm going to start with my name, right? And so tell us your name, because I know you go by Jazz, Mama, Mrs. Rollins, Senora Rollins. Give us your names. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And I know you call yourself a thought partner and protector of joy. And so welcome, because you belong here too.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Yes.
Thanks for hyping me up that way. I need that this morning.
Yes.
So yes, I am Jazz, or Jasmine, or Mom, or Mama, Mommy, Senora Rollins, Miss Rollins, all the things. My name is Jasmine. My parents named me Jasmine because my dad is obsessed with jazz music. And he's like, how can we figure out a way to like nickname her Jazz?
Jazz.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I grew up with my, family calling me Jazz. Some people in my like tight circle call me Jazz now, but most folks call me Jasmine. I prefer Jazz now that I'm an adult and I can, make that choice for myself. What was the other part that you said?
No, it was just tell us a little bit about yourself. So are you a Kentucky native, or are you a transplant? Like, tell us.
So I was born and raised here in Kentucky. I actually just recently moved back to my hometown. I'm in Lexington. I know some people get Louisville and Lexington confused. I am from Lexington. My husband and I, we met in undergrad at the University of Kentucky. So not only was I born and raised here, I went to undergrad here, met my now husband. We've been married 10 years. Shortly after we got married, we decided that we needed a change of scenery, especially me being in my hometown. I needed to, to leave and grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did that. And so we spent 9 years in Cincinnati, and that is where I became an educator. Taught in Cincinnati public schools for 6 years. I coached there for a year, and then I am back. I'm back home. It feels so weird, but so good all at the same time. My parents live 5 minutes from me. It's a gift and a curse.
Ooh, that's a vibe. It's a vibe. Gift and curse vibe.
Yeah, I love it for my kids, being able to be right around the corner from grandparents. So that's really exciting. Speaking of names, all of my kids, I have 3 boys, and then a soon to be baby girl. She's coming in about a week or so. My son's names are an extension of my dad's family name. If you want me to go into that, I can, but I can ramble. So you cut me off when you.
Well, I'm very curious, but we're going to save that for the end, because I also want to give the viewers a little bit of a spark. So if they want to see an extended version of the naming, because we're big on names. I mean, my middle name is Yaya. My first legal government name is Catherine. And you talk about the power of what you name your children and having a meaning in the name. I can totally connect with that. And so right now you are an instructional specialist, right? A coach for English teachers in high school. So when you said my name is Miss, I was like, oh, she's a secondary teacher, because they always be like Miss. They don't care about your first or last name, right? And so just give a little background to the community. You're a passionate educator and storyteller who creates opportunities and resources that empower teachers to celebrate their students' identities and foster a sense of belonging in the classroom. And so shout out to rocking your merch. Just show off your merch for a second. You belong here. She has beautiful crews, stickers. And one of the things that actually attracted me to reaching out to Jazz as an educator was her very creative and informative resource bundles that she creates. And so I want to get into a little bit of that later, but talk really about your mantra, which is empowering teachers to teach and lead with their heart. So can you tell us a little bit about why that's your mission?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mantra, "You belong here," and the "Teach and Lead with Heart" comes from my very first year in the classroom. I had a school administrator, my head principal, really, really made me understand the true meaning of belonging. For the longest, I would go into job interviews and different professional, I'm doing that in quotations, spaces where I thought that I had to fit into this certain box, right? Like, oh, I need to get my hair straight for an XYZ interview. I need to come in and I need to have this on. I need to sound like this. I need to lower my voice because I'm loud. And so my first year of teaching, I had this principal who also identified as Black, which I do as well. And so it was really eye-opening to see, like, oh, there are school leaders that look like me.
Yes.
Like this is awesome, because I didn't experience that growing up. But not only that, I had a little bit of trouble passing one of my teacher certification exams. And so it was between one school interview and like another school interview, and both wanted me to work for their school. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Teach for America, but it was like this whole process. Right. So we did these like little speed dating type of interviews. So I had an offer from who ended up being my principal, and then an offer from another school where I was working as an instructional assistant. And they're like, oh, we'll hire you, but like you only have this amount of time to
get
pass the teaching certification. Yeah, like, oh, you got the one, but you need both or you're not going to be able to be hired. But this other guy, Mr. Ely, my principal at the school where I ended up taking the job, made it very clear, like, no, like we are going to take you as you are. We want you. You're going to pass the test when you pass it. There's no conditions under which we want you to be a part of our school community. And I'm like, oh, let me put my shoulders down. This is the one. And so that energy, I took that energy and I was able to apply it to how I led in the classroom. Yeah. Like if he's accepting me the way that I am, I don't have to lower my voice when I walk in this school building.
Nope, I don't have to straighten my hair.
I don't have to straighten my hair. I don't do nothing. Like it just felt really good to have that be my first experience in the classroom, because it allowed me to like be able to share my story and parts of who I am with my students. And then they're like, oh, she's cool. Like she's loud. Like she's kind of a lot, but like, we're going to do the same. Like we're going to match her energy.
Match her energy.
What I mean when I say like teach and lead with heart, walk into your classroom spaces and be yourself, show up as yourself, because then you're allowing kids to do the same. You're modeling for kids like, hey, yo, it's safe.
Yes.
For you to be you.
Well, shout out to Mr. Ely, because he is a rare leader. I don't care if it's Kentucky, New York, Philly, wherever, like the leaders like that are really, truly rare. And, you know, keeping the humanity in education, allowing people to show grace and patience. And again, you hire for heart. And yes, we're not talking about lowering expectations. Jazz has all her certs and everything, right? But what we're talking about is honoring at each person's journey as a human before as an educator, and how that trickles into classroom community and culture. And so I wanted to actually make that a perfect segue to how you chose to title, like every guest here on Untenured, your episode, and you chose Unaccepted, right? And so when I think about you talking about this perception that you had to put your hair in a bun and wear a button down and talk softer, versus being accepted for who you were and allowed to just authentically show up in a space and use your passion for teaching. Why did you choose that name, Unaccepted?
Well, partly because like my mouth is kind of smart. So I had that experience for the first several years of me being in education, like as a certified educator, but that has not been my experience since. And I think that I'm pausing because I'm like, I want to make sure that this comes out and the message is clear.
Well, don't filter yourself. Don't filter.
The last two roles that I've had, I feel like I'm like the check box, right? Like the Black chick, the diversity hire, like, oh, she's bilingual, like check. She's Black.
Check.
Yeah. She knows a lot of stuff. Like we know that she's qualified, but like we're actually not going to honor your voice. And so unaccepted meaning like, oh, I'm actually too much for you to handle. Like, I think some of the spaces that I've been placed in recently, those organizations aren't quite ready for what it is that I bring to the table.
Listen, you and I are like kindred sisters from across state lines, because one of the things that I've experienced professionally, and this is about you, but I just want to show that it resonates deeply, you know, feeling like when you're the only, that you're Black enough to check the box for their benefit. But when you shake the box and you bring the Blackness that needs to be in these spaces, then it's like, no, muzzle, target, or switch positions, or put confines and obstacles in their way. And so I totally get why you've chosen that word unaccepted, because despite your qualifications, despite your authenticity, despite your professionalism, there's still that undertone of, you know what I equate it to, when you're invited to the party, but you're not welcome there.
Right.
You know, like you show up, got the invitation, but then you're there and it just don't feel right. It just don't feel right. All right. Yeah. So I think one of the things that this also speaks to that I read about is that once upon a time, you thought it was unprofessional to even share stories and part of your identity and background with your students. And so where did that thought come from? And really, what changed your mind?
I think honestly, just my upbringing, like my family values, like, hey, don't be telling your business. Like, you know, well, and I think also too, like you have this idea like ingrained in you from society that who you are is not accepted in certain spaces, because the spaces I grew up in were like white dominated spaces, I'll be honest. And so if there are other people who don't look like you, who don't sound like you, who aren't raised the same as you, then it's like actually not okay to show different parts of who you are, because it's not always safe. Right. Like, and I think like what changed my mind was seeing that Mr. Ely, my very first principal in Cincinnati, he, on the day that he toured, like gave me a tour of the school building, he had on like a jogging suit, like some tennis shoes. And I'm just like he's a professional. Like, and
yes,
you know what I'm saying?
Like disrupting the narrative of what a leader has to look like. Yes.
Right, exactly. And I'm like, well, if he's doing that, then like I'm gonna match that energy and I'm gonna show up as myself. Like he was walking through the school building, showing me, it's the summer, right? Like kids are not in the building. So he hands me my keys. We're walking through the school building. He's like eating a bag of chips and like he's like in his, you know, he's being him. And I'm like, that is what changed my mind. And I also think that kids need to see that teachers are human. Like we are not robots. Like we come from different backgrounds and different experiences. And the beauty is in our differences.
Absolutely.
Like it's actually not fun when we all show up and we're acting the same and talking the same and like everybody's the same.
Well, speaking about talking the same really quick, because I know we had a pre-huddle connection just so that you could meet the crazy person that DM'd you before we recorded this episode. And this is another thing that resonated with me. I'm going to say 2 words and you're going to be like, oh, I got something to say about that. Right? Disrupting narratives. Because I've had this said to me too. Oh, you sound white. Now, is that a compliment? Or is that a huge red flag that we are still in a society where we associate certain vernacular, certain fits or outfits or certain postures with racial or ethnic groups? And I know when we spoke, you talked about that being a component too of your unaccepted choice title. But can we lean into that for a second? Because I've heard that a lot too from family members, from students, like Black, but you sound white. What say you to that?
Absolutely. I think it's a big red flag. And my immediate response is like, I didn't know that we could act colors. Like, I didn't know that certain actions were assigned to certain racial groups.
Yeah. All right. We're going to leave it at that because when we get to they say, you say, I'm going to circle back to it. But I know this was something you shared with me about unaccepted that I want our viewers to really think about and even challenge their thinking if they've ever said it or had it said to them. You know, what does it mean to sound white? But we'll come back to that. And so the other beautiful thing I love about your platform, your brand as Classroom de Rollins, you talk about connections before content. And really what you center as your discussions for your work is around joy, and that your family is a source of that joy. And so how do you discern the fine line between nurturing authentic relationships and oversharing, right? Because you talk about connecting with your students by sharing parts of yourself, but there is a fine line, like you said, between oversharing and then connecting. So how do you navigate those waters?
Absolutely. I think it just really depends on the context. And I want to be really clear too. I think I've shared this before. Sharing parts of who you are and sharing your values and parts of your identity with students doesn't mean that you're placing your beliefs and your opinions onto students. The idea is to teach kids to come up with their own values, to honor their own beliefs, right? Like there's a way to do it to where everybody's belief systems and cultural backgrounds are accepted and celebrated.
Yes. Yes.
And I think like sometimes like, again, I think it depends on like your audience. I taught at a multilingual school for many years, and there wasn't really a such thing as like oversharing. Like there were some things that like I would not share with students, but if I come in and I'm in a mood, like they're gonna know, like
they're gonna know. Yeah.
Like you're gonna have to tell us what happened. I'll give an example that was pretty wild. There was a situation after I had my second at the daycare that he was going to, like a staff member had did something really inappropriate to a child, to a baby in the infant room. And I was sick about it because it was the same room that my baby was in. I'm like, I'm dropping my baby off to go love on other people's babies.
And then my baby's in the
right. Yes. And I was in a mood. Okay. Like I've got it written all over my face. And because my students know, like, oh, there's like super chill
levels.
Yeah,
yes,
there's levels.
Yes, yes.
She's in a good mood. She's not. She's hungry. She's not. She's whatever. And so they were like, you know, what's going on? And I had just talked to my principal about it. And then I'm going up to do my day in the classroom, you know, teach the thing, whatever. And then one kid's like, Miss Rollins, you got to tell us what's wrong. Like, we're not going to be able to do the day with you being this quiet. Like, something's not right. And so I shared with them. It was difficult for me to get up in front of the class and share, like, hey, I'm feeling really sad today because something happened in my kid's classroom that makes me feel really sad and disgusted. Yeah. And so I go into details. I won't go into details here. I don't think it's necessary.
Yes.
But my kids, they were like, well, who is it? Because we're going to find it. And so I think there's just levels to like what you share and how you share it.
Yes.
Because you definitely don't want to cross lines of like, you want to be respectful of how kids are raised, right? Yes. You want to be respectful of the fact that like you're the teacher leader in the classroom.
Yes.
But like, it's okay to tell kids like, hey, I'm having an off day.
Yes. Like, yeah. And you know what's so dope about that? You know, one of the waves now, I'm not sure if it's exactly the same in Kentucky, but in New York State, they have these new social emotional learning benchmarks, frameworks that teachers are supposed to use to connect, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that has been a pet peeve of mine is there's the framework and the benchmarks, but then we don't allow or model for young people how we navigate, even as educators, when we come in and we have a rough situation at home or something happens. Like there's this idea that you leave it all at the door and you zip up and you come into the classroom and you perform. There's elements of that, I think. I don't want to make it so binary and black and white, but the reality is that example that you just gave models for young people how I have something that made me very sad and disturbed. But as an adult, I still have something to do, but I'm allowed to still show up and give like the reality of what I'm going through if it's a safe space. You know, and so you modeled for them how to regulate and manage those emotions while you still have something to do.
Absolutely.
Do that enough for young people. Like when they're angry and they have an outburst, it's like suspend them or do this and that. And it's like, how do you give them the space to build the tools to communicate how they're feeling and show them how you can still have a productive day? It's harder. You need more things in your toolkit to do it successfully, but you can still have a productive day and show up as a professional and have life be life in you.
Right.
You know?
Right. Absolutely. I totally agree.
So I and what's so dope about also what you're sharing is there's this idea that joy, you've heard of toxic positivity, right? Those
Oh,
people who
absolutely.
right. So joy is not the same for me as toxic positivity. And one of the books that you said that you love and you're currently reading is Unearthing Joy by Guldi Muhammad, right?
Mhm.
And given your deep belief in bringing joy into the classroom, which is not toxic positivity, I want to make that very clear. There's a way to have joy every day in a classroom setting without being that. What stood out to you the most about her book, or was something that gave you a new spark or reflection about the presence of joy in the classroom?
So I haven't finished the second one. I finished the first one, The Cultivating
Cultivating
Champions. I'm
Joy.
still currently reading Unearthing Joy. What I love about her work is that it's almost like this like idea of joy regardless. Like I'm
Yes.
going to find joy in whatever situation that I'm in. And then also like teaching our young people like what is joy? Like
I
what
love
does it
it.
look like? What does it sound like? Like how do I live in honor joy in the classroom? And then
Yeah.
also giving teachers the toolkit or the framework, I guess I should call it,
Yeah.
of how to unearth it in our kids. And I think it has to do with like allowing them to show up as their full selves, making
Yeah.
it okay for them to lean into who they are and not shell up their
Yeah.
emotions, not shell up parts of their identity that may not be accepted in specific spaces. So I really like her work, and like I get really excited when I'm like reading through chapters of her work and I start highlighting. I got my post-it notes
Just
out. And I'm
everywhere.
telling my husband,
Everywhere.
like, listen to what Goldie said right here. And he's like, okay, here we go again. But it's just nice to have her voice be out in the world for educators.
Yes.
Yeah, like it's a
It's for me, it's been something that I've subscribed to that I haven't able to like formally name that completely disrupts how a lot of educators are taught to teach. Like it's not about emotion. I'm here to teach you Pythagorean theorem. Or in your case, we're here to learn how to write a well-formed essay. So anybody had time for joy? Where is your topic sentence? You know what I mean? And it's
right.
like the opposite of that, because if it's about connecting and having joy, it's such a simple thing, but it really is revolutionary because it goes against even my own teacher prep program. They were not talking about joy. They
Right.
were talking about what is it called? Levels of learning and Vygotsky and lesson planning and how to write an assessment. And none of that was joyful. So shout out to Gouldy and all of that jazz. And
Absolutely.
when I think of joy, I'm tuning in like I always do from Sadie's. And one of the things that is a really big joyful component of talking about this space is who this space is named after, who is my grandmother. And so when I think about joy and also how grandmothers and their dopeness are a part of this space, I was reading your blogs. And in preparation for this convo, guess which one stood out to me?
Ooh.
In the
I
theme of
don't
grandmothers and Black history.
oh,
She's like,
probably the one about jet magazines and hot combs.
you better know your own blog. And I was not trying to test the sister. Hot combs and jet magazines equals Black history. So first of all, that you wrote it as a math sentence or a math equation. Love that because I'm a math teacher at heart. But hot combs, jet magazine equal Black history. And what I loved about it is that sometimes we get so caught up in Black history being this formal research project or the learning of historical figures, which is necessary. But the way that you made it very close to home and tangible, let's not forget that Black history lives in our own family lineage, our heirlooms and homes. Can you say a little bit about that? Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm like smiling because I'm like, you loved it as much as I did, is what I can tell.
Yes, hot comb. And if you have a hot comb, hold on, you're gonna make me grab it. Keep talking. Go grab the hot comb because there's
Okay.
somebody watching that doesn't know what a hot comb is. Keep going.
Yes, please. I was gonna say I don't have an example. I'm in my house. The hot comb is at my parents' house. But Jet magazines, my grandmother got a Jet magazine, every single issue delivered to her house by mail. Yes. Yes.
And listen, I got the scorch marks to prove it. This was
You
used on
do.
my
That's the real deal.
Look at that. Yes. All right, go ahead. Hot comb. I think I have a Jet magazine. Keep going. I'm gonna look for a Jet.
Yes. Okay. So my grandmother had every single issue of Jet magazine delivered to her house in downtown Lexington. And when she passed, I was like, trying to think of like when I noticed that my parents took like, I guess like their favorites or like the hit jet. I don't know how they decided to like take a stack of them, put them in a basket in the bathroom downstairs.
Yes, come on. Now listen, all I have in here is Ebony, Black Woman, because you know when community members donate, I don't have a Jet magazine, but trust me, it was the Black magazine, just like Ebony. All right, go ahead.
Right, yes. Well, maybe I can ask my parents if we can mail you one so you can have one.
Ooh, that would be so beautiful. And I have something I'm sending to you after this. But yes, let me not interrupt. But we got Hot Combs plus Jet magazine equals Black history. All right, Jazz, go ahead.
So yeah, the Jet magazines are now at my parents' house. And we stayed there when we first moved back to Lexington. We were having work done on our house. So we were staying at my parents'. And almost everything about us staying there annoyed me until I really just sat back and thought, like, this is actually pretty dope. Like that we have a place for us to come back to, and that there's all these little artifacts within the house that represent like who we are. And then the other part, I don't even know what made me thinking about Hot Combs, but my mom was at work and I wasn't working at the time. And I texted her and I was like, I love that you have these Jet magazines in here, Mom. I was like, then where are the Hot Combs? Like, because I have an idea for something I want to share with people. She was like, girl, they in the drawer next to the stove.
You had them. Yes.
Like, where else would they be? They're right next to the stove. My mom used to, she used to hot comb my hair. She would press my hair all the way up through high school. That's the way that I used to have my hair straightened. Yeah, we didn't have like a
blow dryer,
flat iron. Yeah, we did it that way. So I just thought that was really, I don't know. I felt really proud to be able to share those things that are still like alive and well and tangible, like in my parents' home.
Yes. And so if you're ever in New York, and even if you're not, I'll give you a virtual tour after this, but we call ourselves a bookseum because what's sprinkled throughout the store along with full price books are some of my grandmother's heirlooms or things from her era, like typewriter, vinyls, oil lanterns, hot combs, right? And so, we want to inspire you viewers. Yes. Shout out to mamas who are hoarders. And you're like, oh my gosh, why do they still have this? And then growing and maturing and realizing, oh, you have a little piece of Black history here that I can hold on to and pass down generationally. And so Hot Combs, Jet magazine, I feel like I'm going to make us matching t-shirts. That's like, I love that blog along with other ones. I think we should do it. I think because that does equal Black history. We should. And so speaking of Black history, your resources as an instructional specialist are so dope. They go from bingo to bookmarks to reflection prompts using Yara Shahidi's recent TED Talk. Can you talk to us about what inspired that resource creation and what you think separates your dope bundles from the stack that is all out there?
Well, I think what inspired the creation of all of those resources is that I'm really missing being able to create lessons and like interactive, engaging, thoughtful experiences with students. The TED Talk, I follow Yara Shahidi on Instagram and I saw that she posted a clip and I was like, shut up. I stopped everything that I was doing. I'm like, I need to watch this TED Talk right now.
Resource.
And then I thought like, oh my gosh, like, this would be such a dope way to engage students in this idea of curiosity and not limiting themselves to like this one thing that they think that they have to accomplish. And as I'm listening to it, I'm taking notes in my iPhone. Like, I'm like, ooh, like, and I'm like, I can turn this into a resource. And when I'm making resources, I want the focus to be on students being able to celebrate who they are. I want them to connect it to something that resonates with them, something that it reminds them of. And if it doesn't resonate with them, it's not connected to them in any way. Like, how are you challenging it? Yes. Do you agree with whatever it is that you're learning or that you're reading or that you're listening to? And I miss being able to do that. And so that's why I put those things out there, because I know that like I have that gift of getting kids to like reflect in a way that's impactful for them.
Yes.
And I think also too, being an instructional specialist, I have the privilege of I'm a high school specialist. So I work with high school English language teachers who get to work with our multilingual babies. I see so many different types of classrooms, so many different types of instructional practices. And I think what is still missing is that part about like, who are kids?
Hello.
Like, how are we helping kids figure out who they are? How are we helping kids celebrate their own, backgrounds?
Their own uniqueness. And you know what's so crazy about that too? Shout out to Donovan James, who was episode 2, and Shakur, who was episode 1, and Mr. Sunjata, who's episode 3. So I'm always trying to pick out patterns and trends to share with viewers. And what you're speaking to when you say, who are your kids? Something that people don't realize, especially at high school, even though you're a high school teacher for 10 years, over that 10 years, you've probably experienced 2 generations of young people. Right. And youth culture is something that adapts. So just knowing a kid in the 1990s is not knowing a kid in the 2020s. And so how do you stay connected, not just to youth culture, but the individuality of each young person in your classroom? And, when you speak about you being an instructional specialist primarily for multilingual, you know what other word I'm about to bring up? That's another one of your dope blogs, assimilation versus acculturation. Now, again, follow Jazz on IG at Classroom De Rollins, because it's in 4 parts, and shout out to not doing it in 1 part because there's just too much to talk about. But can you talk to us about really the keynote of your IG videos where you say assimilation is the opposite of belonging, like that idea that you have to fit in to belong?
Yeah, I think like if you're assimilating, then you're just doing whatever the norm is, which is the opposite of belonging, because you're not honoring who you are. To belong, I was going to wear this shirt today, but then I decided I was a little bit chilly. But I have a shirt that has the definition of
belonging.
Yes. So to belong is to take up space as your whole self, your authentic self, all of you, without any conditions, like to be accepted unconditionally. So if we're asking students to assimilate, or we're expecting students to assimilate, we're not honoring their unique identities. That video that I shared came about because I was in a training. Okay. And a teacher had asked, it was a new staff training for the district that I currently work in.
Oh, I know the answer. I know the answer. Go ahead. I know where this is going. Go ahead.
Yeah. We were talking about different ways to like welcome students from diverse backgrounds, all these things. And so then it turned into this, well, at what point do we get kids to just do what we're asking them to do? Because like I'm dealing with disrespect. Kids aren't looking me in the eye. I'm dealing with disruptive behaviors, just completely like disregarding the objective and the purpose of the session that we were sitting in. Yeah. And the participant uses the word assimilate. Like, at what point do we get kids to assimilate? And like, at this point, I'm like, well, I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to sit back, be the newbie, take my notes, sip my water. But then I was like, wait. So I raised my hand.
I love it.
And I'm like, well, actually, assimilation is the opposite of belonging. Because at that point, we're expecting kids to be like us when they're not like us at all. We can be who we are, but then kids can also be who they are too. Like, we have to understand that like in some families, some cultures, it's actually disrespectful to look.
Contact.
Yeah, to do.
Come on. I knew that was read a book.
Read a book. And like also, it was really eye-opening because I come from a really big district, Cincinnati Public Schools, super huge. Even though it's right down the road from where I'm at now, I'm like, there's a lot of learning and unlearning and relearning that still has to be done. And it makes me tired.
Wait. What do you mean? Exhaustion?
Exhaustion. You're like, why are you tired? Yes, but like, it just, I'm glad that I said something, because I think a lot of people don't know what they don't know, but we can't keep using that like as an excuse.
Yeah, absolutely. So shout out to disrupting deficit narratives and speaking up in PDs. So if you're an educator watching and you've ever had a jazz moment like that, raise your hand, stand up, whatever feels comfortable, but please speak your voice in that space, because it's not until messages are out and things are said that it even sparks reflection for people. And so that makes me want to ask a sidebar question, since we're talking about very subtly but directly, like navigating spaces as Black women and disrupting like marginalized voice deficit concepts. Have you ever had your content knowledge or expertise questioned as a woman of color, especially as a coach? Because for those who don't know, instructional coaches, their role is to literally be a all day long resource on a teacher's prep through email, through PD, for teachers to grow them in their practice, their pedagogy, their ability to build classroom community. And speaking as someone who has experienced K through 12, and this is no shade, no harm, no foul, but if we're going to speak our truth, because it can never go left, high school teachers are the hardest to move, in my opinion, because they are content specialists themselves, right? So if you think about elementary, you probably had a teacher that taught you all the subjects, English, math, right? But when you get to high school, you have a teacher for math who went to school to study math. You have a teacher for, right? So when you're trying to teach them how to approach content delivery differently, they get in their ego a little bit. And I've been guilty of it too when I was a high school math, because it's like, no, I know my content. What do you know? No, I know my content. So add the nuance of being a woman of color and going into coach teachers. And have you ever experienced that, having your expertise challenged or questioned?
I love this question. I have not yet. So I am new in this role. Like I'm new in this district. So I haven't experienced that yet, but I do have an example of where I've had colleagues ask me something and I give them an answer and then they're unsure about my answer. So they go and they ask somebody else. And it's the answer is the same from the somebody else than it was from me. That burns me up. I've experienced that way more times than I would like to admit.
Okay, so then you just answer one of my follow-ups. What is your pet peeve when coaching while Black? And as I give you the answer and you low-key disrespect me, because that's what it is. You disrespect my response, my expertise, my resource ability by going to someone else to ask them to get the same answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. We're not going to belabor that because I don't want to get the baby cooking. But that is a pet peeve. Believe this Black woman when she tells you that this is a viable way to approach your instruction or your classroom community building. All right. So I know you talked about being originally from Kentucky, spending some time in Cincinnati, and then circling back. At what grade did you have your first Black teacher?
My first Black content teacher, 11th grade. In elementary school, I had a gym teacher who was Black, Mr. Davis.
Okay.
But I did not have a Black teacher after that until I was a junior in high school.
What about a principal? So I know you worked for Mr. Ely. Shout out to Mr. Ely again, because he's a rare gem in the leadership world. Did you ever have a Black principal in K through 12?
No. And I'm pausing because some of my K to 12 years are fuzzy just because I just feel like they weren't that meaningful. They weren't that impactful, and mom brain. So it's like a combination.
Okay, so fair enough. And that's just the question again, as our viewers start to watch episodes. I'm going to actually pull that as part of a clip. You'll notice the trend, whether it's Kentucky, New York, Texas, Brownsville, that a lot of us aren't experiencing Black leadership and even Black teachers. And we'll talk about that at another time. So another dope activity in your bundle resource is something called the soundtrack of my life. Can you name a few songs that you think represent your current life, professionally or personally?
You did some digging. I love this.
This is my research. Come on.
So that particular resource was inspired by we did like a sounds of change activity several years ago in the classroom with my middle schoolers. And so I had them analyze a couple of different songs, and then they had to choose a song that they felt like represented their own life. And one that actually still sticks with me that I shared then, it's still relevant now, is Alicia Keys' We Are Here. I don't know if you've heard it before. You're testing my mom brain right now too. I'm like, hold on, let me come up with the lyrics. Let me think. But just basically building on like this idea of the importance of like honoring who you are, celebrating who you are, but then also being able to be a community member who honors the different parts of everybody that's in the community. Yes.
Absolutely. It's like if your definition of belonging was a song, it would be Alicia Keys' We Are Here. So if you don't know it, don't worry. In the description box, when we load this to the channel, we'll put a direct link so you can catch a vibe and see what Jazz is talking about. And shout out to infusing music into instruction, irregardless of content area, because again, that's something that's a part of youth culture at any generation. And so any opportunity to make connections, I think is really cool. Last music question. Do you have a hype song? Like, oh, I'm having a sluggish morning. Let me just play this song so I can get ready to get ready. Do you have a hype song?
I do. You want to know what it is?
Oh, gosh. Listen, this is for grown folks. So if it's like something with an expletive.
Okay. So my go-to hype song for like, I need to hype myself up for the day, for teaching, for work, whatever, or I need to hype myself up to like deliver a baby. Yeah, Bootsy set it off, not because like I feel angry, but because like it just gets me hype.
Now, sidebar, did you know that Bootsy wrote an autobiography?
No, I did not.
All right, we'll save that for the after, untenured, uncut. But we have a genre here called Hip to the Hop, and we highlight hip hop artists that either have books of poetry, memoirs, etc., with like Gucci Man and Bootsy. I would have never guessed you would have said that, and I love that that's your answer. All right, so now I gotta listen to that song. So another thing I'm doing, I'm creating an untenured podcast hype playlist that'll literally be the hype songs of every guest. And so your song will be on that playlist. Super, super cool. All right. So the podcast is called Untenured, right? We also want to give some space to talk about some of the unspoken truths that teachers of color experience, whether they're tenured or not. Are there any that come to mind when you think about the experience of being a teacher or teaching while Black? That is either an unspoken truth or it's a known fact that's just not something that's forward facing to the public that we experience?
I think I'm thinking of a very specific example that is very unspoken. Like I shared about it back at the end of last school year, but it goes back to just how our voices are not valued. Mm-hmm. So after I left Cincinnati Public Schools, I went to a different district in the area.
Okay.
To take on a role as dean of students. Mm-hmm. And I ended up resigning 9 weeks in, which was really, really, really difficult. But I kept encountering these situations where my voice wasn't valued. Like, again, I was like this checkbox. Yeah. My voice wasn't valued. Students of color were getting written up like left and right, first, second, third week of school. Like we haven't even hit the October chaos yet. And like, we're writing kids up for these things and I'm pushing back. But my voice wasn't accepted. Yeah. And I think like, that's my unspoken truth that I don't share with a lot of people. But I think it's something that needs to be considered when we're thinking about like how important Black educators are and like how it's tough because it was really difficult for me to quit.
Yeah.
They threatened, my like license in the state of Ohio and all that jazz. It's a whole thing, but I think just not having our voices heard and not being valuable parts of like school communities, especially when the numbers are low.
Yeah. And you know what else you're describing, which might be we might need a part 2 for this because I know it's supposed to be a power hour, but you have that internal struggle between choosing you and having to resign from a position because it's just either morally or physically or social emotional, like it's just not sitting well versus knowing, and it's not from a place of ego, like if I resign, then who will be there for the kids, right? But knowing that you're there to serve the community. And if I'm a single voice and I leave, like what happens, right? And if every one of our ancestors that was in a situation where they felt like that just opted out, like I know what that internal struggle is. And so kudos for choosing you in that moment because it's a hard thing to do. Definitely a hard thing to do. Okay, so speaking to that, I'm not sure what the prep program is like in Kentucky, but I am familiar with Teach for America because although I wasn't accepted, I got into New York City Teaching Fellows, which is a comparable program. Let's say teacher prep programs get remixed. What are some of the new requirements for certification in Jazz's world? Like things that should be added or talked about or assessed?
Well, I definitely think that teachers need to go through some sort of like who am I courses, because I think that a lot of times people are placed into classrooms with their their perspective and like their lens of like how teaching and learning is.
Yes.
And so they're doing it from their lens and who they are. But I think sometimes teachers don't know who they are when they're walking into classes. Like they don't know who they're bringing to the class every day. So I think like some very intentional, like intensive identity
awareness, right?
Yes.
And I just want to say this sister does not need for me to put excuses or a skirt on what she's saying, right? But because I'll be honest, there's parts of myself I'm just learning now at 100 years old, and I purposely left out. Right? Some people don't learn things about themselves just in their walk in life until their 40s and 50s. So that's not a shade or a discredit on teachers. That's just the human experience, right? So taking time before you teach to start to tap into who you are. I think that's like paramount. I didn't even think of that. And that's really, really dope that you brought that to the conversation. All right. So last thing before we go into our micro segments, I always like to infuse a little data. I'm a huge proponent of data-driven instruction, not as the means to teach, but a consideration when thinking about adapting lessons or content. And so a recent research study, and I'm sure this is not news to you, but for our viewers, 3 out of 4 children in America can't read above 4th grade level. 3 out of 4. That's 75%, right, of children in the United States cannot read above a 4th grade level in America. That's 1. 2, Black students in particular, Black and brown, I should say, are 2 to 3 years behind when it comes to reading than their white counterparts. And then this one, last one that I want to share, 3rd grade. Not only in New York because it starts formal state assessments, but just in the scheme of K through 12 education, 3rd grade is the grade that is not only a predictor for incarceration, but your chances of being on welfare, right? And so when we talk about school to prison pipelines, and even the fact that they use data in states to determine where and how many prisons to build, they look at 3rd grade reading scores to determine where to build prisons. All right. Any stark reaction to any of those data points as an instructional specialist, as a woman of color, as a human on this educator journey, as a mother of 3 beautiful boys and 1 on the way?
The first thing that comes to my mind, honestly, is just our beliefs about what our kids are capable of. I think that setting up all of these pathways for students is like a mindset thing. Like if we think that students aren't going to do well, then they're not going to do well. Like what we think about our kids impacts their trajectory.
Yes.
And I think I'm gonna leave it at that because it's so loaded, and I get so overwhelmed sometimes thinking about like how I'm raising 3 Black boys and like what do all these stats mean for them? Right? Yeah.
Well, listen, I don't want to overwhelm a sister, but I always like to put in, there's very little scripted about it, but I always want to put a little data point in, especially for non-educators watching, about the gravity of and the urgency behind not just having Black teachers in spaces, but Black leaders, and understanding how important allies between parents and educators are for moving that needle. All right. So our first micro segment, I feel like we already had 3 oh hell no moments. We're going to formally connect to the one that you shared with me. And for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, oh hell no is a chance for us to come and weigh in on a current event of our guests' choosing, to really have us say why this is like something that had us shaking our head and saying, oh, hell no. And so Jazz brought to my attention, I wasn't familiar with this story, but as soon as I read the title, I said, oh, hell no, that Oklahoma It was in NPR recently. They mistakenly gave out over $50,000 in bonuses to over 500 educators, right? And I don't want to get my facts wrong, so let me pull up a few comments that I want to make specifically. So in 2023, Oklahoma had a new teacher signing bonus program which aimed to address a critical shortage of early education and special education teachers. The $16 million program drew half of its funding from unused federal pandemic relief, and the rest was from funds allocated for students with disabilities. And so to be eligible for this, educators had to commit to teaching elementary or special ed students for 5 years, and they couldn't have taught full time before they applied. And so teachers working in rural or high poverty schools qualified for bigger amounts because of the gravity of what they were charged to do, and essentially gave 522 teachers these bonuses ranging from 15,000 to 50,000. So they give out these bonuses and then they realize that they had done so mistakenly. And the question is, do teachers have to pay it back? Okay, tell me why you picked this. I love that you're laughing. When I read it, I literally did one of these. I wiped my glasses.
You had to wipe your glasses off.
Pay it back?
Pay it back. Well, asking folks to pay the money back from a mistake that was made that had nothing to do with them is the wildest, You know what it reminds me of?
Uh-oh.
Listen, so these PBIS systems, these reward systems that are set up for our kids. Oh, you earned this amount of bucks, or you earned this point, or whatever. But then as soon as something goes wrong, you take it.
Take it back.
It doesn't work. Like, that's actually not the message that we should be sending out. And like the same for teachers. The big issue is if you paid teachers more, you wouldn't have to give out stipends.
Hello.
You wouldn't have to do incentives or whatever it is that you are doing.
Yes.
I was blown away that someone would even fix their mouth or fix their fingers to type an email to say like, hey, we're gonna need that back. Like,
yes.
No.
So I'm going to be watching this because I want to see what happens. And I hope every teacher, they come together and they're like, oh, hell no. And they don't give it back. Because, you know, when I think about some of the challenges and beautiful opportunities to experience growth, working with young people with special needs or that are in need of high remediation, like teachers are underpaid. And so any bonus you give them really doesn't bring them up to speed with what they should be making. But again, that's a whole nother podcast. But we're saying, oh, hell no to that. We don't think those educators should give it back. And I saw something interesting on Instagram. And actually, my mother forwarded it to me and she watches. So I don't want to be capping on here. She sent me this Instagram that said something so interesting. So when you think about doctors in the professional field, right? When they are doing their work, no one asked them to come out of pocket for their stethoscopes, their microscopes, right? And when you think of any other professional field, they are not asked to come out of their own personal pocket to get the supplies they need to do the daily functions of their job. But teachers are. You got to go in your pocket to get that extra You Belong Here bundle from Classroom Ed. You got to go in your pocket to go to Staples to make those beautiful bins. And it's like, why? What does that say about how America values teachers? And more importantly, what does that say about the dire need to have extra funding go to education if that really is the profession that trains and teaches all professions?
Right.
Ooh, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. So I will make sure that the link for anyone interested in reading more of the details is in the description box. You just experienced oh, hell no. And now we're moving on to chucking up the deuces. So for this, I'm giving Jazz 3 options. Technically, all of them are harmful, but Jazz is going to be put on the spot to say which one she thinks is doing the most harm, that if she could wave her beautiful magic wand and remove it from the public school or education system as a whole, she would do it right now and it would go in effect immediately. All right, we're going to start off with ground balls. They should get spicier. Don't forget our cue if you need it. She knows what All right, here we go. So you're chucking up the deuces to one of these 3.
Okay.
Students not seeing themselves in the books they read, students not seeing themselves reflected in the teaching staff, or students not seeing themselves in the leadership.
Oh my gosh, all of them gotta go.
No, listen, you and Donovan. No, that is not a choice. I'm gonna put you in
Okay. All right.
one.
Just one. I
Oh boy.
think at the very least,
No right or wrong.
the one that has to go, if you can't have leaders or teachers who look like the kids, please make it a priority to have books and resources and things that kids can identify with at the very, very least.
And that's
So
like the very, very, very least. All right. Perfect. All right. So next one, outdated teaching methods, outdated textbooks, or outdated technology.
outdated teaching methods.
Boom. Okay, here we go. Next one. Teachers who teach to the test, teachers who teach to their comfort level, or teachers who teach for the summers off.
Oh my gosh. I cannot believe I'm only allowed to pick one. They all gotta go.
All gotta go.
Teachers who teach to the test, y'all gotta go. Like,
you gotta go.
You gotta go.
You gotta go.
I'm sorry. I don't even look. I'm like blacked out. I don't even remember what the other two were. But like, stop teaching to the test. That's not what we're here for.
All right, here we go. Two more. You got this. You're doing great. Okay, teachers with a deficit-based mindset about students, teachers who say they don't see color, or teachers who work in low-income communities only until the loan forgiveness requirement is met. Ooh, 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 ooh.
It's Monday morning. Come on. Okay.
I know. I'm sorry. I should have gave you a heads up. You don't know these questions, by the
way. Okay. I don't see color.
Come on, 1922. Or
yeah,
maybe,
we can't.
Okay, I gotta go. All right, two more. Here we go. Whitewash curriculum, standardized assessment, or chalk and talk instruction.
Whitewash curriculum.
Booyaka. All right, last one. Performative SEO. So you're just doing it for dog and pony. Empty professional development. Like I could have had a V8. That was 2 hours of my life. That's horrible. Or surface level, culturally responsive teaching. Okay, Martin Luther King, moving on.
Surface level CRT. Come on.
Now. And listen, I'm not going to do what some of teachers who shall remain anonymous do to you. I'm not going to ask you to explain your why. You said what you said. That's your choice. Okay. All right, chuck up the deuces. We just did deuces. See, we made it through. That wasn't that bad. All right, here we go.
That was fun.
That was fun. All right, cool. Last micro segment. They say, you say. So I'm going to tell you something that is stereotypically said, either something great or something horrible. You give your rapid fire clap back. Okay. No explanation needed. Just first thing that comes to mind, you say it. All right. Here we go. How many of these do we have? We have 7. You ready? Mm-hmm. Here we go. Oh, you sound white.
What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
Okay. Boom. They say angry Black woman. You say
passionate Black woman.
Hello, Ohio. Okay. They say, but being American requires conformity. Like that's what America's about. You say
it's actually the opposite of that.
They say, I'm not racist. I have biracial children. You say
that means absolutely nothing.
Here we go. Here. They say, I've been teaching longer than you've been alive. I don't need a coach. Uh-oh. You say
my observation notes say that you do, baby.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So they say teachers don't need more joy. They need higher salaries. You say
we can use a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. All right. Last one. They say Kendrick Lamar and Tupac, shout out to your resource bundles. They have no place in elementary or high school education. You say
those are 2 of the greatest of all time.
You better know the goats. You're gonna teach our babies, you better know the goats in all lanes, right? All right. So we survived that. Shout out to Speaking Your Truth, clapping back with rapid fire. In the spirit of the space that we're in, and also showing that I know your website. I love that you do something called book challenges. Is there any book challenge that you want to share with our viewers? Like I charge you to try this challenge with your reading journey for 2024.
So the book challenge that I did with my students, which is the reason I created a teacher Instagram page, was to motivate my students to read for the book challenge. So it initially was like a teacher page for kids to follow me and their families to follow me. So the book challenge that we did, I charged them every school year with reading more than they've ever read before. For more avid readers, they picked a number like, oh, I'm going to read 40 books or 100 books. But for kids who it wasn't the norm for them to even complete a book on their own, like if you read one book this school year, then like so I challenge everyone listening to read more than you've ever read before. I'm in the middle of a book challenge with my family right now. I'm losing. It's really not a contest. It's a challenge against yourself. But we have a board in the kitchen, and my 7-year-old has been doing like little tallies. It says Mom, Dad, and Brett. He's winning.
He's winning.
And he's coming for me.
Well, shout out to the youth leading the way. You heard it here first. Read more, whatever that number is or should be. No one's judging you. Just whatever you do, grow your self-awareness. Read more this year. That's the challenge that Jazz is setting out for you. I can't say enough about how you're helping me kick off this work week with joy, with very upbeat convo. I hope it wasn't too spicy for you. Shout out to, again, this dope Black soul, Black woman educator, Mama, doing her thing, signing up to talk with us on Untenured when she's like 3 weeks away from delivery. And even more so, I know one of the things you shared with me, if this is not going to make you too upset, you were like, oh, me on a podcast? And absolutely, you belong here. You're a dope educator from Kentucky. Thank you for all you're doing to speak your truth. Thank you for signing up to be on this podcast. You are accepted in Sadie's house. And if you're unaccepted, well, then I'm going to be in company with you. So shout out to everyone who's unaccepted, just like Jazz, because the real vibe is to be in that group or community with her. We're going to be dropping this episode soon. Any last thing you want to say to our viewers outside of grab some joy before we go?
I don't think so. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate you. You belong, you belong, you belong. Thank you, Yaya.
Yes. So this was so dope. Again, Unaccepted. We are so excited to have Jazz all the way from Kentucky. The plan is to do a follow-up with her after she delivers her next beautiful bundle of joy. You've just experienced another episode of Untenured. Stay blessed, and we'll see you soon.
See ya.